So, welcome everybody. I'm going to talk about how to build desktop applications with .NET Core 3 and then Windows desktop applications. So before somebody thinks, okay, I'm going to do this on Linux or on Mac, no, this is just Windows. It's just desktop application building as we've always done it. And I'm pretty curious, just by show of hands, how many people actually build WinForms or WPF applications on a day-to-day basis? Cool. How many people have to do that because their boss is telling them? And how many people are passionate about Windows desktop development? And awesome, yeah, it's cool, cool stuff. I'm Edwin van Wijk. I work here at Info Support as a principal architect, and I'm a back-end guy. So I'm really about, APIs and web API services and stuff like that. But I have done my share of Windows desktop development, and I don't hate it. It's just that I don't do it often. And when I saw the entire list of sessions that we're going to do for this event, I thought, well, it's .NET Core 3. We need to have a session about desktop development. So I took one for the team, and I did this session. So what are we going to look at today? First of all, we're going to look at what's the future of desktop development. So we're going to look into what's happening with .NET Core 3 and everything that's coming after that. Then a little short demo of how you can build desktop applications with .NET Core from scratch. So if you don't have an existing application, what are you going to do? And then, in my opinion, is more interesting if you have an existing application that you're building or that you're running on a day-to-day basis. How can you port these applications to .NET Core? Then we're going to look at how you can use modern UWP controls within WinForms or WPF apps. And finally, we're going to look at some new way to package your application using MSIX. So this is basically the agenda for today. And first of all, let's dive into the future of Windows desktop development. If you look at what we're doing right now, so if we don't look at the .NET Core story, then probably everybody that's doing desktop development is doing this using the .NET framework that's available on Windows. And you can do WPF or WinForms application. And that's it. And we can do that also once .NET Core is here. So this is not something that is going to die or whatever. This is just a way to build applications that run on Windows. But of course, next to the .NET framework, we have .NET Core. As we all know it already, we can build ASP.NET Core web applications. We can do data stuff. This is not everything that you can do with .NET Core, of course. But you can do this all cross-platform. So this runs on Linux, this runs on Windows. And now there's something new with .NET Core 3, that is the desktop application side of it. And this is added by what's called desktop packs. These are open source stuff that is added to .NET Core, but it's still Windows only. So, and that is obvious because, WinForms and WPF run on top of technologies that are not available on Linux or on Mac. So this is pretty obvious. I cannot tell you anything about the story, what's coming next for Linux or for Mac. I don't know. I don't know if there are any ideas to port WinForms to Linux. I don't know, but I think it would be a fairly big task to do, and I don't think that is the way that Microsoft will go. And then there's the big question: should I upgrade my application? And as I'm an architect, I can just say it depends, because if you build a new application, then I would say yes, just go the .NET Core route. Start using the new tooling, start using the new stuff, and just build your application. If you have an existing application that's just running on Windows, you're not actively developing it and changing stuff, adding features, leave it running there. That's no problem. You have to think about, okay, what's going to be the best way to go about this application on the very long run. But for now, Windows still will have .NET. It will be updated with your patches and everything with Windows, and that's here to stay. That's, by the way, the latest version, 4.8, which is coming out. This is the one that you could target then. So it depends, and you have to think about the application. So if you want to port, what could be the advantages that you gain if you go to .NET Core? Well, first of all, we've been talking about it all day, performance improvements. .NET Core gives you better performance. We've seen a couple of sessions why that is and how many people are working on that. And it actually shows. If you port an application to Core, you actually see it running a bit faster. So that's pretty cool. And then a big pro of .NET Core is that you have this flexible deployment system. So you can do side by side. You can run multiple versions of the .NET Core framework and runtime on your machine. And this is also true for desktop development. So you can build a desktop app and package the .NET runtime with your application and then deploy that. So that's pretty cool. And then there's the tooling. You just have the .NET Core CLI and all the tooling that's available for .NET Core, and you can use that for building desktop applications. So that's pretty cool. What's next? If we look further than .NET Core 3, this is an announcement that has been made during the Build timeframe, Microsoft Build conference. The next version of .NET will be .NET 5. So .NET Core 3 will be the latest .NET Core. There won't be a .NET Core 4. And .NET 4.8 will be the last .NET, well, as we call it, full framework version that will be there on Windows. And from then on, we will have .NET 5. And this will support all the workloads that you see here. So web, desktop, what I'm going to show today, but also mobile. And mobile, if you look at the mobile stuff running on Xamarin and running on Mono, for instance, that's using Mono under the covers, this will all be consolidated into one platform. So you can do everything. If you can build C# and you can do .NET, you can build all these applications, and that's pretty cool. That is the promise of this picture, so to speak. And of course, there's all the runtimes, the languages. If you want to do VB or you want to do C#, all the tooling with Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, everything is available to you to build applications. So that's pretty cool. There's a link to the blog post that introduces that if you want to read more about this. And then there's going to change something in the cadence of releases of .NET coming out. And basically, we're now at .NET Core 3 preview. So it will be GA around September, it's saying here. Then there will be a 3.1, and then somewhere next year there will be a .NET 5, and then every year a new version comes out. So you can, every time you can upgrade to a new version, and all the even release numbers will be long-term supported. So this will be very predictable, and this is sometimes really hard if you look at how .NET and how these frameworks are being updated. This is pretty cool, so you can just predict when a new LTS version comes out. So you can plan ahead with your IT department, for instance, when to upgrade. So how do you build desktop applications on .NET Core from scratch? Well, you can use the .NET Core toolchain, just as I showed you, John. You can also use Visual Studio 2019. Right now, because .NET Core is still in a preview, you have to set a checkbox in your tooling in the settings of Visual Studio, because else you don't have the .NET Core options. But this will, of course, go away once .NET Core will be fully released and generally available. If you want to do designers, there's no WinForms designer yet. So you're on your own. If you know how all this boilerplate code is being created in the back, you can do it by hand, of course, but the nice thing about WinForms is that you have a designer and we have to wait. They're really busy with porting this. There are some pretty cool blog posts and videos out there in which they explain what they are doing underwater. This is a fairly big task to get this WinForms designer running on .NET Core. Pretty interesting, but it's not there yet. And you can also then use Visual Studio Code. But then, of course, you're also on your own. There are no designers yet. So what does this look like? This is a nice little demo to get you up and running. This is PowerShell, and I'm running here. I have my machine, and I've installed the 3.0.100 Preview 6. So this is the latest release of .NET Core 3. It came out about 2 or 3 days ago, so I'm living on the edge with these demos. Bear with me. But it's pretty new stuff. And what I can do now is, with the .NET Core tooling, you can just say .NET New, and it has a whole collection of templates for stuff you want to build. And if you look closely now, there's a WPF application and a WinForms application in there. So that's pretty cool. So this is just, if you install .NET Core, it's already out of the box there. So I can now say, for instance, .NET New, I want a WinForms application, and I want to call it .NET Core Summer Event. And just as all the other templates, it will create a project for me, and it will create some files, and that's it. It has a CSprosh file, there are some C# files in there, and if you have done WinForms development, you will recognize these terms. And now I can say .NET Run. Oh, not Ruin. I almost typed Ruin. I don't know what happens then, but okay, let's not go there. And there it is. .NET Core application in 5 minutes. And it's an actual form, and I can even resize it by default. Wow. This is pretty cool. And if we look at the code, it is, well, you will probably recognize it because it's just the same code that you get when you do that on full framework. I have a program file. I have some designer. This is the boilerplate code that I was talking about. And if you know how this works and you can type it in yourself, you can just build forms applications.
Can we use the designer from old Visual Studio? So is the generated code going to be fundamentally different? Could I copy paste it into VS 2019 and use?
Yes, great question. The code will be the same, and you could even use the old designer for the .NET Core project. And I will show you that in a minute in a WPF application. But the same thing you can do with WinForms. There are some great videos, by the way, by the .NET team with Olia, and she explains how to do this. And if you look at the CSprosh file, this is a pretty empty file, which we love nowadays in .NET Core. And I'm just telling it, okay, this is a WinExe. This is also a cool thing. We get executables now, so not just a DLL, but also an exe. It targets .NET Core App 3.0, and it uses WinForms, and that's it. And this is to tell the runtime, okay, and the compilers, this is a WinForms application. Yes? So that's a little warmer-upper for you guys. You can also do this, of course, with WPF. And then if you start Visual Studio, you have a designer. I will show you that in a minute. But it's pretty easy to get started. But then it becomes interesting, because if you have an existing application, how are you going to port this application to .NET Core? What is it going to take? Well, there's kind of a series of steps that you need to follow. And the first one is make sure that your application is already on the latest version of the full .NET framework. So 4.7.2, or if you get 4.8, on 4.8. And then run your application and make sure that nothing breaks. And then there's a pretty cool tool that's been created by the .NET team. You can install it as an extension in Visual Studio, and you can actually analyze your application and see whether or not you're compatible with .NET Core. And I will show you that in a minute. Then you need to go from the packages.config that we use for all our NuGet packages, for all our references, and you need to make it package references in the CSprosh file. I will also show you that in a minute, and there's also a tool in Visual Studio to help you with that. If you have any class libraries that are part of your application, make sure that they're .NET Standard compatible. So make sure that they're targeting .NET Standard, and then you can migrate your app. And how much work that is, yeah, that's up to the application, what's in there. So based on the report from the portability analyzer, you can see how much work it takes to bring this application to .NET Core. And then the most important step, thoroughly test your app. Because once it compiles and runs, it's not necessarily true that everything works. So you have to make sure if you have unit test or UI test or you have people testing, please let them test this application very thoroughly before you say, yes, we're on core and we go to production now. So that's important to take into consideration. To show you that, I'm going to port an existing application. And this is actually an application that I've created in 2016. It's a WPF application. And I've created this for my wife, and she actually uses it multiple times a day. And now all her friends also use this application. And you're probably thinking, wow, this must be a great application. So let me just run it. My wife does digital scrapbooking. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's basically making collages of pictures and then adding all kinds of very, I'm going to say that, cute graphical elements. It's not the most manly thing, but I think it's very nice if you see the things that she makes. And the first thing that I'm going to show you is the About box. And this is, for instance, one of the things that she created. So it's just, you create something and then you add some flowers or butterflies, or if it's Halloween, you have some pumpkins and stuff like that. And she really creates very amazing things. And the nice thing to see here is that the only thing that I've changed in this application is that I've added one line to the About box in which I say on which framework I'm running. Am I running on full framework or am I running on core? And we will see this in a minute when we go to the core side. Well, what can this application do? I will quickly open one of her catalogs because to make these nice collages, she buys all kinds of graphical elements. And these graphical elements are all in a set of folders. And for every kit, as they are called, there's a thumbnail. And what she can do now is point this application to one of those folders, and it will scan all the subdirectories. And everywhere where it finds a kit, it will create an entry with the thumbnail. So she can say, okay, this is a nice one. This is an autumn-inspired kit. And she can also tag these things. And then there's a pretty cool index in there. I've built that. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty fast also because there are 7,000 items in here, something like that. And then she can search them. And if she says, oh, this is a nice Halloween kit, she can right-click and directly open the folder where this kit is in. So this is for her very useful because she used to have to dive through or search through all kinds of folders and stuff like that. So this is the app. It's not very complicated, but it actually has users. So it's a production application. It is just WPF, so I just have some views in here, and I'm not going to dive in too deep into how this application's been built. And I'm going to start with porting this to .NET Core. And you can do it in several ways. You could, for instance, start changing all kinds of stuff in this project, in this .NET Core project or .NET project. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new project in Visual Studio to this solution, and I'm going to do a WPF core application. And I have this option because I've checked this checkbox in my tools. So I'm creating a WPF core application. I'm going to call it digiscrap. Wow, if you can type. digiscrap catalog.core, and it will create the application. So this is basically the same as .NET New, WPF app, digiscrap catalog. And there it is. And if I open the main window, you can actually see that there is a designer in Visual Studio. So this is all there is to it. I create a new core application, and I could now start designing this app as any other WPF application. But I only need the shell of the application, so I'm going to throw away these automatically generated files. And now I have an empty .NET Core WPF application. And this looks exactly like the WinForms one, but now it says use WPF. And what I can do now, and this is, in my opinion, a very elegant way to start porting applications, is I'm going to start adding stuff to this project file, and I reference files from the other project using relative paths, and that's completely possible. So first of all, and I'm not going to type this out for you because I have 45 minutes, but I put some stuff in here in which I describe this application, and I say, do not generate an assembly info for me because I already have one in the original project, and I don't need another one. I want this to be the assembly name that is being output and the root namespace, and I want this to run on WinX64, and I use the application icon from the other folder. And here you can see the first thing that I'm reusing from this other project by using a relative path. If there are any questions, by the way, just ask. By doing this, the same way, I can just add all the C# files, except the one in the OBJ folder, and compile these. Include all the settings, include all the config files, include LD-embedded resources. And I'm just taking all the files from the original project and referencing them using relative paths. This is how I reference the application definition, so basically the starting point of my WPF app, the app.zemel. And because I've used a naming convention that every window is called blah window, I can add all the windows for my application, like the about box and the main window, just like this by using wildcards. Then, the last thing that I need to do, because I have all my application files now, is add package references for the third-party libraries that I use. So I use Serialog for logging, I have some image resizer thing, and a custom dialog library, and that's it. And if I now save this file, and you watch the Solution Explorer here, then all the files appear just as in the other project, but all with a little arrow next to it to indicate that this is a reference. Right? That's simple. And now I can just build it. There is one thing that I'm still looking into, and that is why I need to do this. I have some images in here. That's all the icons and the stuff that you saw. And the way I reference these from my code, I need to copy them over to the new project, because there's a certain way it needs to embed it as a resource, and I haven't been able to do that in another way. There probably is one, but hey, I'm a back-end developer, so well, don't blame me. And it now adds these files to the CS_proj file. And if I now set this as the startup project, and for another demo later on, I will already set this, I want to run the release version and then the x64 version. And if I now do Control F5 and run the application, I haven't changed any code. It will just run the application. And if I now go to the About box, you see that I'm running on .NET Core. That's the only thing I needed to do. And why I didn't need to change any code, that you can see if I go to my original application, I right-click and I say, analyze the project portability. It will start the .NET Portability Analyzer, and it will give me a report. And if I open that, I will actually see why this was the case, that I didn't need to change anything, because I'm 100% compatible with .NET Core version 3.0. So I didn't need to change any code. I am not very compatible with, oh, that's the wrong zoom, not very compatible with 2.2, .NET Core 2.2, which is obvious because about half of the code in this project is Windows stuff and buttons and all the things that you don't have in .NET Core. So that's obvious that, that it's not compatible. But here you can see that all the things that are available to me for 3.0 I can just use, and that's why I didn't need to change any code. Yes? The really cool thing about this way of porting your application, because I now have two fully operational applications. If I change the starting project to the other one, I'm running on .NET Framework. I can actually change files here with the original designer, and this is the way to do that for WinForms, for instance. You can do the same thing, and then you can use the WinForms designer in your original project, change stuff, and then recompile it for .NET Core, because it's basically just a shell that holds references to all the files. And if I open the About window here, and then not the designer, but the code behind, you can see this is how I make sure that if I look at the About box, I can see what is the framework I'm running in. And I'm opening this in the .NET version, and now you see that this is activated, because the .NET Core app compiler directive is not set. If I now open this same file here, and I double-click it, it opens the same file, but now in the other context, and now you see that .NET Core is active. So your Visual Studio is aware in which context you are opening stuff, and it will give you IntelliSense and all that kind of stuff to help you build these applications. So, pretty cool, I think. So if you're building these applications, I was just talking to a couple of developers that do a lot of Windows development, and they do UWP stuff. And UWP is, of course, the whole Windows 10 with all these cool map controls and inking and touching and all these cool stuff that you can use. And all the Windows 10 APIs, like notifications, the Action Center, and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's something new that's called Zemel Islands, and this is a way to use these kinds of controls and the APIs in a WinForms or WPF app. This is, by the way, not only for .NET Core. This can also be used in all the projects that run .NET Full Framework 4, 5, and up. So what are Zemel Islands? Like I said, it's like a bridge between the old and the new world. Let's call it that. So you can use these controls. And you have all kinds of stuff available for you. This can be quite complex. If you are not very much into the desktop development and you want to try this out, then you have to take into consideration lots of stuff. But there's a library to the rescue, which is the Windows Community Toolkit. And this is a toolkit created, like it says, by the community, and it will take a lot of heavy lifting for its content. These are just NuGet packages that you can reference, and here you see an overview of the NuGet package for WPF, but there's also one for WinForms. So if you're using this from a WinForms application, you reference the WinForms variant of this one. As you can see, I have here the 6 6.0 preview 5, so this is also still preview. You have to make sure that you have the right version, the latest version of this stuff. There's also a GitHub repo, so you can also see all the code. That's pretty cool. And this is a library that you can use, the SDK contracts library, that will give you access to all the Windows 10 APIs, which you can use. And I will show you how to do that, what you can do with these kind of controls if you use this toolkit. I'm going back to Visual Studio, and I'm going to close this solution. And I'm going to create a new one. And again, I'm going to create a WCF of a WPF app for .NET Core. And I'm going to call it, let's call it Maps WPF Core. It again creates an empty application for me, like this. And now what I can do is, first of all, I need to have the references to these packages that I just showed you. And of course, we're going to do that by just adding them to the project file. And these are the package references. So this is the toolkit for WPF, and then the UI controls. As you can see, this is a newer version as the version that I showed you on the slides. This has cost me about an hour or two to change my demo because this was a new version. Some stuff changed, but it got better. So I said, okay, I need to use this in my demo. So I changed some stuff around. And here I have the library that gives me access to the Windows 10 API. I'm going to save this. And if I now, in the back end, the packages will be restored. And then in a moment, I will see some additional controls popping up here in my toolkit. And you see things like the ink toolbar and the ink canvas. So those are controls that you can use, but also the map control. And I could just pick up the map control, drop it into my WPF window, and I can start using it. So that's pretty cool. And this toolkit makes it this easy. So there's lots of stuff going on underwater, but this is how you as a developer can use these controls. I'm going to remove this control now because I have some snippets ready, of course, because I'm not going to type. That's takes me too long. What's going on here? I'm going to put it in here. I've created a dock panel and I added a button and a map control. And the map control is not known right now because I need to have a using statement so it knows where to get this control. And Visual Studio will help me just by doing control dot. It will give me a suggestion. And now it is known. And I've created an application with a map and a button. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use, so this is basically the Zemel Island, right? You can see it. There's an island here. I see some palm trees, some fish, and the control is living in there. I also have this button, and what I'm going to do now, if I go to the definition of this event handler, I will add some code. And this is the code that I'm going to paste in there, and I'm going to walk you through that. Well, first of all, I want to use the geolocation of my laptop here. So what I'm trying to do is I want to know where we are, and then zoom the map to the place that we are. That's what I'm trying to do here. This geolocator thing, I don't know what it is because I need another using statement. And this is Windows Devices Geolocation. This comes from the contracts library. If I use this thing, then a lot of squigglies go away. Then I do some async stuff, so I need to make sure that this method is also async, and then Visual Studio is happy. And yeah, the code is pretty simple. I create a new instance of the locator. I get the current position. I change it to a basic position, which I need to create a map point. And then I'm saying to the map control, try to set your view at the place where we're at, and then zoom in to 13.5, the zoom level. No, it's not pretty. I guess you can imagine what happens. But like a good magician, I show you that it actually works. So here we are. This is the map. This is where Carl lives, somewhere around here. This is where our other speakers are coming from. And if I now click this button, it will just find us and tell us that we're in Veenendaal. It's pretty cool. And this can also work in a WinForms application. So if you need these kinds of controls, with these Zemel Islands, with the Windows Community Toolkit, you can do pretty cool stuff. Any questions? Because I need a drink, so stay sharp. Okay. Let's truck on. And then the last item I want to show you is once you have this application up and running, your .NET or your .NET Core application, there's a new way of getting this application to your end users. And I didn't know about this, so I started reading up on it, and I think it's pretty cool. It's called MSIX. That's the new format or the new packaging solution. And the really cool thing is that it prevents machine pollution. So you all know that if you install applications, some registries are being created, there are some files being created in your profile, and once you uninstall the application, you're not sure that everything is removed from your machine. There's always some residue that's on your system. And the real cool thing is that if you install your applications using MSIX, it will basically, I don't want to say sandbox it, but it will be in a sort of virtualized environment. So if it changes things in the registry and on the file system, it will make a note of that, and when you uninstall the application, everything is removed. So that's pretty cool. Also in there is automatic updates, just like we had with Click Once. So if you install your application, you can say, okay, watch that location, and if a new version is there, it will be automatically updated, and the user has the latest version of your application. It does this differentially, so only the files that have been changed, those are being downloaded to the machine, and this makes it, of course, fast and optimized. And if you want to distribute your app, there are several ways. The first way is through the Microsoft Store. So if you have a Windows application development account or a store account, you can just attach your application to the store, then it will show up in the Microsoft Store and people can install it on their machine. But side loading is also possible. And it's also a bit of a weird term, side loading. It all sounds a bit hacky, but it's fully supported in here. And then you could just, for instance, put your application on a file share. And this will be the location where it automatically updates from. But it could also be an HTTPS endpoint. So if you have a website somewhere, you can host your application there, point your end users to this website, and then install it from there. And if you have an update, it will be automatically downloaded. The one thing is, if you start side loading, you have to sign this package. And of course, if you do that with the Windows Store, then there's a packet or the certificate, and the trust that the user needs to have for this certificate is a Microsoft certificate, of course. If you side load, you create your own code citing certificate. And then you must ask your end users to trust that certificate. So this is a bit, this is a bit cumbersome. If you don't want that, you need to dash out some dollars and buy a real code signing certificate, then you're good. But for my scenario, I just created one myself, and I just ask all my wife's friends to trust my certificate. How awesome is that? If you want to do this, you need to have the Universal Windows Platform development workload installed on your machine. Talking about pollution. This is a big one. So you get all kinds of stuff then, but you need that because the packaging option is in this workload. This is what I installed on my machine. So I will go back to Visual Studio and I will reopen my DigiScrap catalog tool. And I'm going to target this one. So this is the project that we just opened. I will add a new project to this solution. And in this case, I want a packaging solution. Here it is, the Windows Application Packaging Project. I'm calling this Setup because I'm old school. And then you get a weird question because it needs to know which version of Windows 10 am I going to target. Because APIs can shift between versions of Windows 10. So if you have the fall creator 18.0 whatever update, I don't even know how these versioning works. But the main thing here is that I've chosen for this demo, okay, I want to be on the latest version of Windows. So I just put both of them on the 18.09, the latest version. That's available here. It will then create a setup project for me. And then I can start basically configuring this setup. There's an AppX manifest file in there that has lots of settings. I will open it and I will start changing some stuff here because the application is called DigiScrap Catalog. And I'm not going through all these tabs because this is basically the same as you did for WPF applications or UWP applications before. I want to have a nice icon, of course, a nice image for the application. And for now, I'm just going to disable scale 400 because of reasons and the time. And I will generate pictures for that. So all these nice things that you need for looking nice in the store and application icons are created for me by this one picture. You can specify which capabilities you need from the machine. So in this case, I only need an internet connection, but I need your camera or want to do geolocation. You can all specify that here, so the user has to give you consent to use that. And I'm going to skip to packaging. The rest is less important for this talk. I'm going to update the name of the application. I want to be known by my full name. And then, just like I told you, you need to have a certificate, a code signing certificate. And I will just choose one that I have installed on my machine. It's a self-signed certificate. Some brilliant UI design here, and then OK. And that's it. So I've now defined my package, how I want to package my application. I save this, and what I then can do is start adding my application to this part. So I'm adding a reference. And just like I did before, I can just reference another project in this solution. And I'm referencing the DigiScrap Catalog core project. And I say, OK, fingers crossed, because sometimes a yellow bar appears that Visual Studio ran into a problem. But it's good today. Awesome sauce. Save this. So now my package is ready for me to deploy. How am I going to do that? First of all, I'm going to right-click on the Setup project, and then I'm going to go to the Store menu. And this is how I could associate my app with the store. But I'm not going to do that now. We're going to sideload it. So I'm just going to create application packages. Then I get a dialog, a Windows or a wizard dialog. First of all, I want to sideload. I want to enable automatic updates, because I think that's pretty cool. I'll leave this all on the default, except this one, because I created this application to target x64, right? This is very important because you're now packaging your application. You need to make sure that you use the right processor architecture that your application was built for. I don't need any debugging information. And then something interesting, I can now say at which location will this application be uploaded, and also the new versions will be uploaded. So this is the location that the application will look for automatic updates. Well, for this demo, I've created a share just on my machine. So I can just say Emerald, that's the name of my machine, and then setup. That's it. That's just a share that's available on my machine. And I want that the application to check whether or not the new version is available every time that it runs. And that's all it needs. Fingers crossed again. Most of the time this works the first time. Sometimes it breaks, and if I try it again, it works. This takes a while. Any questions?
Is your DigiScrap Catalog app open source?
Not yet, but I can open source it, yes. But then you will see my crappy code, so I'm thinking about it. But okay, yeah, great question. You didn't have a mic, right? Fine. Yeah, like I said, this takes a while, so. But we need to wait for the result to show up. And there it is. It's finished creating the package. It shows you some information. The package has been stored here in one of the subdirectories. The installer location is Emerald Setup, which is an empty folder right now. So if I open this with my Explorer, it's empty. But they've created a cool button. This is cool for demos. Copy and close. And it then copies the created package to the installation folder and closes this, this dialog. So if I now go to the folder, I see a nice application package. And this is something that you can just put on a website or on a share just like this, and then point your end users to it. The nice thing about it is that it actually creates a nice HTML file that you can host with a nice picture that I've put in. And now I can get the application. So if this would be running somewhere in Azure, I can just go to the URL and get the application. There's some information about the versioning and all that kind of stuff, who the publisher is, what the processor architecture is. Some additional links, so you could actually download the publisher certificate over here. You can get the separate installer file for the application, and you can also get the entire bundle. Because Somewhere deeply nested inside is your application. There are some packages around it. There's some metadata, because this is what the whole infrastructure needs in order to get this package into the store or whatever. But the nice thing about this is that there's also a Get the App button, and that's all you need to click. And it will then open an installer, because it recognizes this package. And I'm going to leave this launch when ready open. You also see the capabilities. So if you could choose some capabilities in this package manifest. Those are listed here. And if I say install, it will install the application, and then it's on my machine. And it will actually show up in my startup folder and everything. So that's all you need to do. People might think, why is this such a big application? Well, there's a trick that I did, because I created a self-contained application, which contains the .NET framework. So it's just fully contained. So if someone gets this package, doesn't have any .NET Core installed on the machine, it will just install the application and run. So it will just unpack the .NET Core framework somewhere in a profile folder and run the application on top of that version. And now you can see that this is the .NET Core version that we're running. Cool, right? What I could do now is I create a new version of the application, override it here, so there will be another folder, and then it will be automatically updated when you start the application. Yes?
Can you show the size of the files in the setup folder?
Yeah, I can do that. This is 68 megabytes. It's compressed. Yeah.
For uninstallation, is it in the add remove programs or on the store? How does the user now uninstall? Well, the app is awesome, but
This is the application on my machine in the start folder.
yeah.
I can also go to settings, application, and it's in there. I can just right click and say uninstall, and it will remove it from my machine. Yeah, irrespective of whether or not it came from the store or if you sideloaded it. Yes. Talking about this deployment stuff. Let me go to this application. If I open the project file. So this is, I showed you now how to set it up using MSIX, but you can also do, of course, .NET Publish. That's something that we already had with .NET Core. And this has the option to create, like I said, a self-contained app. And I will do that now. I will publish the application. No, let me do one other thing first. I'm sorry. I need to add something to this project file. Because one cool new thing that we get with .NET Core 3 is the single file option. And I can add that to my project file. This is also a flag that I can give on the command line with /p, and then publish single file is true. It will do the same thing. And if I save this now, and if I now publish this application, I'm not going to say publish. I want to publish it to a folder, and I want to create a new profile. And then what I can do here for the target framework, it is of course .NET Core App 3.0 because that's what we said. It is WinX64, and here I can choose to make a self-contained application. I'm going to save this one, and now I'm going to publish this application. And what will happen now? It will create a self-contained app, which is a folder with the executable, the DLL, and the .NET Core framework. But it will also do something else. So if I go to the output folder, bin, release, let me see whether or not it took that other one. Here it is. So this is basically the self-contained folder. So it's all the DLLs from .NET Core and my DigiScrap catalog application. And there's an additional published folder here, and it just has one executable, which is 173 megabytes big. And the thing is, if I double-click this one, it will just unpack the .NET Core runtime and stuff that's in there, put it somewhere in a temporary folder, and then start the application. A nice anecdote is that my wife uses a cache cleaner. It's a tool that she thinks she needs, and it actually throws away this temporary folder with the .NET framework. So we actually had the problem that she just clicked on it, yes, it works, and then I got, at work, I got a WhatsApp message, oops, with a giant exception box, unable to find runtime, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, this is not going to work. But it's just because the .NET framework was removed from the machine, yeah, and it needs that. So beware of that if you use this. So, to wrap it up, Windows desktop development is definitely not dead. It's actually receiving love again, and people are seeing new ways of creating applications with WinForms and WPF, which are awesome technologies. It's old, yes, but it still works pretty good. Once we get to this .NET 5 thing, I'm also still wrapping my head a little bit around it, what is all going to mean, but this will unify the .NET platform for all the workloads, which is pretty cool. We can just, if you know C# and if you know .NET, you can build, well, virtually anything. Also, like I said, if we .NET Framework 4.8 will stay part of Windows, and it will also be updated with Windows. And don't underestimate this, because if you do this cool self-contained app, yeah, it's self-contained, so you're also responsible yourself for updating that version of the framework that's in the folder. Don't forget that. This can be a nuisance for, you know, operations people and stuff like that. So take that into consideration when you look at this. And then, yeah, which version to use? Like I said, for new applications, just go for .NET Core, the latest, greatest stuff. And existing applications, yeah, you have to look at what is the business case to upgrade it. Because it can be as easy as I showed you, but it can also be a lot of work, and then you have to make sure that it's worth that. And if you want to distribute your application, look at MSIX, it's pretty cool. And with that, I want to thank you and